December 11th, 1972, three men climbed out of a capsule floating in the Pacific Ocean, and without anyone fully realizing it at the time, humanity's first chapter of lunar exploration quietly closed. No one planned for what followed, a 53-year gap in which every single crewed space mission stayed within a few hundred miles of home. An entire generation was born, grew up, and started raising kids of their own in the space between that last splashdown and this one. That gap is over. On April 1st, 2026, the Space Launch System lifted off from Pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center. Aboard the Orion spacecraft, named Integrity, 4 astronauts left Earth orbit for the first time since Apollo 17. Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, Jeremy Hansen. Victor Glover became the first person of color to travel beyond low Earth orbit. Christina Koch, the first woman. Jeremy Hansen, the first Canadian. Reid Wiseman, the oldest person to do it. Every one of those records fell on the same mission. This video walks through what these 4 people have experienced and what still lies ahead, phase by phase, from the moment the engines ignited to the moment the heat shield faces its real test on the way home. Because the reality of this mission is stranger, more claustrophobic, and more dangerous than most coverage lets on. The crew spent the days before launch in quarantine, isolated from their families, going through daily medical checks, following a sleep schedule and nutrition plan engineered down to the calorie. The goal is to make sure they arrive at launch day fully hydrated, fully rested, and carrying no illness that could compromise a 10-day mission with no way to get a replacement crew. Before boarding, all 4 crewmates signed the inside of the White Room, the enclosed area at the end of the crew access arm at the top of the launch tower. It's a tradition dating back to the Gemini program in the 1960s, and the room has stayed white ever since in its honor. Then they suited up in orange Orion crew survival system suits, pressurized garments designed as wearable lifeboats, built to keep them alive if the cabin loses pressure during ascent. They're bulky, stiff, and uncomfortable. Not a design flaw, a design choice. The Space Launch System stands at 322 feet tall and weighed 5.75 million pounds at liftoff, taller than the Statue of Liberty, roughly 8 times heavier than a fully loaded 747. At the base, 2 solid rocket boosters and 4 RS-25 engines, the same core technology that flew the space shuttle for 30 years, rebuilt and recertified for a vehicle they were never originally designed to power. Together, they produced 8.8 million pounds of thrust, 15% more than the Saturn V. 4 adults in a pressurized cabin of roughly 330 cubic feet, the volume of 2 minivans. That's about 60% more space than the Apollo Command Module offered its 3-person crews. Spread across 4 people instead of 3, the math stops feeling generous. Christina Koch said before launch she was counting on microgravity to make the space feel bigger once they were floating. She was going to need it. When the boosters ignited, the crew felt approximately 3 Gs pressing them into their seats, 3 times the force of gravity. Former shuttle astronaut Wendy Lawrence described the sensation of a shuttle launch as someone sitting on your chest, a force so heavy she couldn't lift her arm in front of her face. The SLS is more powerful than the shuttle. The crew's bodies weighed 3 times what they normally do. Breathing becomes work. Moving is nearly impossible. The vibration from the solid boosters didn't come through the seat. It traveled through the bones, a deep structural shaking that didn't let up for 2 full minutes. Then the boosters burned out and separated. The ride smoothed dramatically. The RS-25 engines carried them the rest of the way, and approximately 8 minutes after liftoff, the main engines cut off. The silence was immediate. Pencils floated out of pockets, hands lifted from laps. Anything not strapped down lifted gently off whatever surface it had been resting on. Integrity was in orbit. The 4 solar array wings deployed, giving the spacecraft a wingspan of roughly 63 feet. And for the first time, the crew could look out the windows at the planet below. Orion has 4 windows, small but functional, and from their altitude, the curvature of the Earth is unmistakable. The thin blue line of the atmosphere, barely visible against the blackness, is the only thing standing between 8 billion people and the vacuum. Once in orbit, the mission entered a careful verification phase. The crew and mission control worked through every system on the spacecraft, life support, propulsion, navigation, communications, thermal control, one by one. Because once they commit to the moon, there's no space station to dock with and no rescue vehicle within range. If something is wrong with the spacecraft, this is the window to find it. This is also where Victor Glover flew Orion manually. Hands on the controls, eyes on the instruments, performing proximity maneuvers using the European Service Module's thrusters. Testing that the crew can precisely guide this vehicle through the kind of procedures future missions demand. Approaching a docking target, repositioning near a surface. Not autopilot, not simulation, actual deep space handling data with people aboard for the first time. The European Service Module, built by Airbus for the European Space Agency and bolted to the Orion's back end, carries the propulsion system, generates electrical power through 4 solar array wings, manages thermal control, and stores the water and gases that keep the crew alive. Without it, Orion is a capsule. With it, it's a functional deep space vehicle. Then came the Translunar injection burn. 5 minutes and 55 seconds of firing that accelerated integrity to the velocity needed to break free of Earth's gravitational pull. For the first time since Apollo 17 in 1972, human beings left Earth orbit. After that burn, the upper stage separated. 4 people in a capsule, roughly 240,000 miles from where they needed to be, carried forward purely by momentum. The free return trajectory is the only contingency. Even without another engine burn, the moon's gravity will redirect them back toward Earth. That's not a reassuring backup plan. That's the only one. As Earth shrinks behind them, every hour home gets a little smaller in the window. The communication delay with Houston grows too. Not by much on this mission, about 1.3 seconds each way at lunar distance, but enough to make a conversation feel slightly off. Say something, wait. The answer comes back a beat late. It's a small but constant reminder that you are genuinely far from anything. Koch and Hansen stowed the foot pants from their seats and folded some equipment away to open up as much living space as possible. The toilet occupies roughly 5 cubic feet beneath the floor near the main hatch. A curtain provides privacy, which matters when one of your crewmates is 6'2" and the bathroom is the size of a coat closet. Urine is vented into space. Solid waste is sealed in bags and stored for the return home. There's no water recycling on this mission. Every drop the crew drinks was loaded before launch. Food comes from pouches. A briefcase-sized food warmer heats some items. Most meals are eaten at ambient cabin temperature. The menu includes barbecue beef brisket, cauliflower, butternut squash, macaroni and cheese, shrimp, tortillas, nuts, cookies, chocolate. Jeremy Hansen packed maple products and salmon from Canada. There's no fridge, no oven, no table. You squeeze food out of a pouch, chase floating crumbs before they drift into an air filter, and wash it down from a pressurized water dispenser. Sleep is scheduled, 8 hours per rest period, except on the compressed first day when the crew caught rest in broken shifts. All 4 sleep simultaneously for most of the mission, in hammock-style bags tethered to the capsule walls. There is no bedroom. There is no door that closes, other than the curtain over the toilet. The life support system never stops. Fans circulating oxygen, scrubbing carbon dioxide, regulating cabin temperature. It sounds like the machine it is, the one keeping them alive. Exercise runs 30 minutes daily on a flywheel resistance device installed beneath the side hatch. It provides up to 400 pounds of load, squats, deadlifts, rows. The International Space Station has dedicated exercise machines totaling over 4,000 pounds, filling 850 cubic feet. For 10 days in microgravity, the flywheel is enough to slow the muscle and bone loss that begins almost immediately in weightlessness. For longer missions, it wouldn't be. Hygiene is bare minimum. No showers, wet wipes, liquid soap, dry shampoo. Personal hygiene kits include toothbrushes, razors, a hairbrush. Everything happens near the toilet. Brush your teeth, swallow the toothpaste, or spit it into a wipe. Move on. Privacy is a luxury this spacecraft doesn't offer. Communication with Earth runs through handheld microphones, headsets, and a system that supports video calls with mission control and families. The crew also has tablets and laptops loaded with procedures and notably entertainment they chose before launch. Nobody at NASA confirmed what's on the playlist. Someone on that crew almost certainly loaded a movie set in space, because astronauts are exactly the kind of people who watch a space film while actually in space. Floating near the instrument panel is Rise, a small plush mascot designed by 8-year-old Lucas Yee from Mountain View, California, selected from over 2,600 submissions. It depicts the moon wearing Earth as a baseball cap, a tribute to the Apollo 8 Earthrise photograph. When it drifts into frame in zero-gravity footage from inside the capsule, that's confirmation the crew is in deep space. Before we get to the lunar flyby, there's one detail about this mission that most coverage buried, and it's the most consequential technical fact of the entire program. After the Artemis I uncrewed test flight in 2022, the capsule came home and everything appeared nominal from the outside. Splashdown on target, all systems within limits, by visible measures, a clean mission. Then engineers removed the heat shield panels. The Avcoat ablative material, engineered to char and burn away in a controlled fashion during re-entry, carrying thermal energy with it, had broken apart in chunks. Over 100 locations showed unexpected material loss. 4 separation bolts had partially burned through their thermal barriers, leaving deep erosion channels where there should have been clean char lines. The investigation identified the cause: the skip re-entry trajectory. During a skip, the capsule enters the atmosphere, partially decelerates, bounces back into space, then re-enters a second time. During that pause, heat accumulated inside the Avcoat faster than the material could vent the gases it was generating. Pressure built, the compound fractured and ejected pieces. Ground testing hadn't caught it because facilities were running the material at higher heating rates than the spacecraft actually experienced. At those rates, ablation proceeded normally. The moderate sustained thermal load of the skip pause, lower temperature, longer duration, was the specific failure mode no test had replicated. NASA's fix, keep the Avcoat, changed the trajectory. For this mission, Orion enters on a direct, steeper path, one continuous descent. The thermal pause is eliminated. The ablation runs uninterrupted. The trade-off is higher G-forces on the crew during re-entry, since the braking happens faster. The crew has reviewed all of it: the investigation report, the photographs, the engineering case for the fix. They launched anyway. After 4 days of coasting, the moon fills the windows. This is the moment the mission shifts from engineering test to something more difficult to quantify. 4 people see the far side of the moon with their own eyes, a view no human crew has had since 1972. At maximum distance, integrity reaches 252,757 miles from Earth, the farthest any human has ever traveled. The previous record was Apollo 13's 248,655 miles, set in 1970, not by design, but during the emergency slingshot that brought a crippled spacecraft home. Artemis II exceeds it by roughly 4,100 miles on purpose. Orion passes approximately 4,700 miles beyond the lunar far side. At that distance, Earth is visible from the windows as a small blue disk, small enough to cover with an outstretched thumb. Everyone who has ever lived, every city, every ocean, every person alive or dead, obscured by a fingertip. The astronauts of Apollo 8 described it as the most profound loneliness they had ever experienced. The Artemis II crew traveled even farther. The far side is geologically distinct from the hemisphere we always see. More heavily cratered, thicker crust, none of the dark volcanic plains visible from Earth. The crew photographs it systemically and gathers data that feeds directly into planning for Artemis III and beyond. As integrity passes behind the moon, all communications cut off for approximately 40 minutes. The moon physically blocks every signal. No voice from Houston, no telemetry. The crew operates entirely on their own until Orion clears the far side and contact is restored. From the moment integrity crosses Earth's magnetosphere, the radiation environment changed entirely. In low Earth orbit, the planet's magnetic field deflects most high-energy particles. Beyond it, 2 main threats are continuous: solar energetic particles from the Sun and galactic cosmic rays. Atomic nuclei accelerated to near-light speed by distant supernovae, passing through the spacecraft walls and through the crew's bodies. If a major solar particle event occurs during the mission, the crew shelters near the toilet, where stacked water containers and waste storage provide additional shielding mass. During the 40-minute far-side communications blackout, no warning from Earth can reach them. They would detect the event from onboard instruments and manage it entirely on their own. NASA's space weather team monitors the sun continuously throughout the flight, but space weather doesn't follow a schedule. Orion also carries the Avatar payload, bone marrow cells derived from the crew's own blood samples, to study how the human immune system responds to deep space radiation and microgravity. The data feeds directly into crew protection design for longer future missions where the flywheel and the wet wipes won't be enough. After the flyby, the moon's gravity does most of the work. Integrity swings around, picks up gravitational momentum, and begins the 4 to 5 day coast back toward Earth. During the return, the crew continues monitoring systems, running medical checks, and documenting their experience. They're also providing something no simulation and no uncrewed test can replicate: real-time human feedback on how Orion performs in deep space with people aboard. How does the cabin temperature settle after 5 days? Do the sleeping bags keep the crew stable, or is there drift? Does the carbon dioxide scrubber maintain air quality clearly enough to work through a technical problem at 3 in the morning on day 7? These are questions with answers that only exist after a human crew has lived in the machine. As Earth grows larger in the windows, the crew begins preparing for the phase of the mission that has produced more engineering scrutiny than any other. Integrity hits the top of the atmosphere at approximately 25,000 miles per hour, Mach 32. At that speed, air molecules compress so violently in front of the capsule that they form a sheath of superheated plasma reaching approximately 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly half the surface temperature of the sun. The avcoat absorbs that energy, chars and burns away in a controlled fashion, carrying the thermal load with it. A few inches of engineered resin compound stand between the crew and incineration. On the other side of that material, the astronauts are supposed to feel comfortable cabin temperatures. That is the margin they are working with. Inside the capsule, the force is built progressively. First a gentle tug, then a steady push, then a crushing weight. As deceleration climbs, the crew's bodies become heavier and heavier. Breathing requires deliberate effort. The windows glow orange, then white, as the plasma wraps around the capsule. Communications black out as the ionized gas blocks all radio signals entirely. For several minutes, the Artemis crew is completely unreachable. No voice from Houston, no telemetry, just heat and pressure and the sound of a spacecraft moving through the atmosphere at a speed no human being has survived before this flight. When the capsule slows below supersonic speeds, the drogue parachutes deploy, yanking it into a stable descent altitude. Then, 3 main parachutes billow open above the Pacific Ocean near San Diego. The capsule swings beneath them and descends toward the water. Splashdown is hard, not gentle. The capsule hits the ocean surface solidly and bobs in the swells. A U.S. Navy recovery team aboard a San Antonio-class amphibious transport vessel moves in immediately. Divers enter the water, attach flotation collars and tow lines, and the capsule is winched aboard. The hatch opens. 4 people breathe outdoor air for the first time in 10 days. Their legs will feel unreliable. Their sense of balance will be off. 10 days in microgravity degrades the vestibular system's understanding of what gravity means, and even standing upright requires concentration as their inner ears recalibrate to a world where down is a fixed direction again. 685,000 miles, 10 days, a spacecraft the size of 2 minivans, 4 people who ate rehydrated shrimp from a pouch, slept tethered to a wall, exercised with a resistance device bolted to the floor, cleaned themselves with wet wipes and stared out their windows at the far side of the moon, at the whole of Earth reduced to a disk coverable by a thumb, and came home trusting a heat shield that cracked the last time it was tested. That's not a failure of engineering. That's the reality of what exploration actually requires. We don't go to the moon because it's safe. We never did. Apollo 13 proved that in 1970. 3 men alive by improvisation and the skin of their teeth. Columbia and Challenger proved it in the most painful way possible. Every crewed mission beyond Earth orbit is a calculated bet, exhaustively analyzed, meticulously planned, built on the conviction that the engineering will hold. The math is right and the materials will perform the way the models say they will. Artemis II is that bad, made with the full knowledge of what broke last time and a conviction that the fix is right. 4 people wagered their lives on it, and they knew that better than anyone. They'd seen the photographs of the fractured heat shield, sat through the briefings, asked every hard question available to ask, and they decided to go anyway. When they come home, if the shield holds, if the parachutes deploy, if the ocean catches them right, they'll have opened a door that's been closed since 1972. Not the door to the moon. We opened that a long time ago. The door to going back. Artemis II pushed humans farther from Earth than any mission in half a century. But there's a spacecraft that left long before any of this crew was thinking about the moon, and is still moving through interstellar space right now. Watch how far will Voyager travel, because that journey puts even this one in perspective.